Hello and welcome to the Evolving Christian Faith Network video blog. My name is Bo McGuffey. I also go by the name Irreverence or Christian Anarchist, spelled with an X, on the web. And the point of this video blog is to explore alternative understandings of Christianity. I'm a progressive Christian, and so I want to promote a progressive vision. But today I want to briefly look at how we conceive of the power of God and how it works in the world. There are, a couple different ways that we can do this, but in churches, one of the ways that we identify how we understand that God works is that we do it through liturgy. And I'm a Presbyterian, and the one of the things that we do, and other churches do this as well, but one of the things that we do is when presenting our offerings, we sing what is called the Doxology. Praise God from whom all blessings flow, praise God all creatures here below. And it goes on, and it's a song of praise and thanksgiving to God because all of the wonderful things that we have received, we are giving thanks to God for. That's little bitty things or great big things, a little thing that a new opportunity that arose yesterday by chance around noon or whatever, or just very thanksgiving for the gift of life itself. It doesn't really matter. And the idea is that all good things come from a good God. But what do we do about the things that aren't so good? What do we do about those things that don't seem like a blessing, but seem like an absence of a blessing, or a blessing should have happened, but it didn't, or maybe it just downright feels like it's a curse? What do we do with that? Um, why, why did God not spare the children in the school from the tornado? Why did God not save the child from the car crash? Why did God not spare me of this withering illness? Why? We don't know what's going on here. Bad stuff of life happens, and what do we do with that? These kinds of questions are actually questions that religious people ask all the time. It's easy for spiritual folk to give thanks to God for blessings. After all, God is good. But how do we understand the bad things in life? And how do we understand how a God that we say is good relates to those bad things? Over the years, there have been different ways that Christians have understood this relationship between God and the bad things. And I'm going to throw out three options here. There are, of course, more, but I'm just going to throw out three because it gives us an idea of what we're looking at. Well, one option is to say that both good and bad come from God. It is to say that, of course, there's a lot of good in this world, and those good things we give thanks for because it's a blessing. It's good God giving us blessings, and that's fine. There's also bad stuff too, and the bad stuff is there because God put it there in some sense. We, as part of creation, are part of a sinful reality. And so that sin it contrasts us with God. And effectively, the bad stuff that happens to us is God's way of cleansing us of that sin. When I think back to when I was studying history way back in the day, I used to study 17th century English history. And I remember that many believed that the king was appointed by God. Effectively, whoever you got as a king became your king because that was God's will becoming manifest. And so you get a king, and then you say, wow, this is a wicked king. Well, what do we do with that? Why would God give us a wicked king? And to that, some people would answer, well, it's because of something we did. This is God's way of punishing us for our sin, for our rebellion. Whatever, we might not be able to tie in directly what it was that caused this, for God's God to give us a wicked king, but the wicked king is there to cleanse us of our sin. It's because of something we did, and it's God's way of fixing it. That's one way of understanding things. Another way is to say that it shares in the first understanding in that it understands that creation is, we live in part of this sinful reality. And while and that there's a good side of creation and there's a destructive side of creation, and the good side of creation is holy and divine, but the not so good side, the destructive side of creation, that is not a manifestation of God's will at all, but it's actually counter to it. God does not want destruction in the world, and so we see that it's separate from God's will. God still has the power to make it stop. Sometimes God does intervene. Sometimes God heads off the bad. Sometimes God allows it to happen. Which leaves us with the question of why. Why in the world would a good God want these bad things to happen? God doesn't want it to happen, but why God allows it to happen is a total mystery. And so that's where it's like, why? The answer is we don't know. We don't know the mind of God. That's part of the mystery of God. Now, for the most part, I think that most Christians operate in one of these first two understandings, or maybe a combination of two somehow. But regardless, the idea is that God has the power to force God's will upon creation. But God is either already exercising that power and bringing out the bad. The idea it's one of God's ways of cleansing creation, or that God has the power to stop the bad, but for whatever reason chooses to allow it. So God refuses to exercise the power by allowing the bad. But for most Christians, I think that they're going to fall into one of these two categories, and it really has to do with a sense that this kind of power, a power over creation, seems to be a necessary attribute to God, if God is to be God at all. But that doesn't exhaust our options, because there is a third option. And that third option says that to understand the power of God as a power that fixes the bad is actually to misunderstand how the power of God works. That's not what the power of God is. So if we expect God to step in and take away the bad, it's just not going to happen. God does not intervene because God does not have the power to do so. The power of God, divine power, is an entirely different kind of power than that kind of power. So, in these three basic examples, what we really see is that there are two categories of understanding of what divine power is. The first two options understand divine power as what is known as a form of coercive power. Okay? And the last one understands divine power as being non-coercive. So we've broken down these three options into two categories. Wonderful, but what are we supposed to do with this? What does this mean for us? Well, let's break it down a little bit more. Now, really quickly, coercive power, which is the first two options. This is the kind of power in which one forces one's will onto a situation. It is an active and intentional manipulation of events in order to change or alter the current course of those events against their inclinations. Okay? So it's power from on high coming down and rearranging things. Let's run with an example. Let's say we're dealing with a river. What we know about a river is its inclination is to go downhill. Okay, follow the path and path least resistance and go downhill. What we're going to do then is, if we're going to use coercive power, we are going to build a wall. We're going to build a dam, and it's going to stop the river in its tracks, and it's going to and the river's going to go, oh, where do I go now? It gets slammed up against this wall, and then we're going to build out this wall farther in the direction that we want it to go. And now the river has no choice, but it has to follow that, okay, because it's been stopped, and it's been forced in this different direction. That's coercive power, basically. It doesn't have a choice anymore. It's against its inclinations. Non-coercive power is not sort of an external power being forced upon something, but sort of works off of an internal power, okay? It's a power that works with a situation. And the image that I've come across, it seems to be most popular anyway, with regards to how we describe the way that non-coercive power works, is a lure. Non-coercive power lures us into new possibilities by opening our inclinations that already exist up to those new possibilities. So if we run with the river metaphor again, imagine instead of building a wall, okay, just boom, it slams, instead of building a wall that stops the river in its tracks, imagine we say, okay, well, what is the inclination of the river? The inclination of the river is to go downhill. And so what I'm going to do then is I'm going to build a trench that takes the water in the direction that I want it to go. Now, that trench will lure the water down this new path. The water is not being forced down the trench against its inclinations. Rather, it's not being stopped going down its original path. It can still technically go down, and some of the water probably will go down the original path. Instead, it is simply given another option. This option, this new creative option, if you will, that has been created, lures it down an alternative path. Its power, non-coercive power, is power that happens on the inside, works with the situation. Now, okay, the river metaphor, I know, does not entirely work the greatest. There's maybe another metaphor that's better out there. I know that there are some problems with, but hopefully you get the idea of what I'm talking about when I'm using images of coercive versus non-coercive power. Now, against popular opinion, I identified the power of the divine as being non-coercive. I totally understand why other Christians say that God needs to wield coercive power. Okay, I get this. I understand all about coercive power. I understand that for many, if God doesn't use coercive power, then it doesn't make sense that this is a God at all. That makes sense to me. I understand that. But I also believe that there is a good reason to believe that divine power is non-coercive. I believe that the power of God is non-coercive because I believe that the nature of God is best identified by the statement, God is love. Because I believe that love is the primary characteristic of divine power, I have to ask myself, how does love work? When I love someone and when I'm at my best at loving someone, do I force this person to do what I want? Do I command the lives of my loved ones? Do I dominate them? Do I force my will onto them? Do I seek to control them and make them do whatever it is that I want them to do? That's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum, I can ask a completely different question. If I love them, do I allow them the freedom to be and to become themselves in the context of the relationship that we have? I remember back when I was in high school, I was in band, played the cornet, not very well, but I played the cornet. And I was back in band, and I remember our band instructor used to have this poster on her office window, and it read, I don't remember exactly what the image was. I think it was like a couple of hands and like a bird or something like that. But anyway, but what I do remember is the words. The words said, if you love something, set it free. If it comes back to you, it was yours. If it doesn't, it never truly was. Something that has stuck with me through the many years. But also, I guess, taught me a lesson too, and that is that love is not a power that forces its will onto the reality of others. Love is a non-coercive power that allows a situation to freely be, all the while hoping that in that freedom, more love will emerge. So for those of us who think of God's power as being non-coercive rather than coercive, there is a strong reason for it. it is because of our vision of God. And that vision says that God is love. And therefore, the power of God is love. And since love is non-coercive, so too is the power of God. To put it more theologically, the attributes of God, the way God works, if you will, the attributes of God are subject to the nature of God, sort of that who God is. The way God works is subject to who God is. Some food for thought. I've presented 3 options. There are many more, lots of variations. I understand this, but I think that asking the question about whether divine power is coercive or non-coercive is an important one for spiritual people because it affects how we understand how we should be exercising power in our own relationships in the midst of our own lives. If the power of love, or if the power of God is the power of love, and if the power of love is truly non-coercive, and if I'm trying to truly resonate with that divine power, then what might that mean for my own personal spiritual growth as I emerge more fully into whom I am meant to be as a person? That kind of question, that totally affects everything. That affects my sense of where I'm going. It affects my vision of my life's trajectory and my perception of what I need to be doing with my life. Is the power of God, is divine power coercive or not coercive? Or is it somehow on a spectrum in which there's some balance in there? It's an important question that we should all be asking ourselves. And with that, I will call it a wrap. Thank you for spending time with me. Again, my name is Bo McGuffey, Irreverence or Christian Anarchist, spelled with an X on the web. I hope that you have some food for thought as you leave here. I hope that you find that there's something that you can take out of here into your own life that can somehow enrich where you're going. And thank you once again for spending time with me. If you want to hear more about what I have to say, please go visit my website, evolvingchristianfaith.net. That's evolvingchristianfaith.net. Thank you very much, and until next time, peace.